There's something moving out there. I think it's the zombies. Hide! Oh, no, it's not. It's just grown-ups. Hide!
Hello, we are the Bloobcast, and my name's James.
I'm Ewan.
And I'm Rob. And the question is, why are we called the Bloobcast?
Yep.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Okay, before we get started, our first episode of 2022. Welcome back, and thank you for sticking on for the last couple of years.
Has it really been a couple of years so far?
Year and a half.
In 2020, so
I guess.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. The time goes fast.
Horrifying.
I know.
Today, we are talking about the stop-motion animated dark fantasy comedy horror film. That's what Wikipedia says, so I'm rolling with that.
That's a lot of
Paranorman. I was just reading it out, going, oh wow. Paranorman, made by the stop-motion animation studio Laika, named after the dog that the Soviets sent into space for some reason. But yeah, Team Laika, who are responsible for other such great children's films as Coraline and The Box Trolls and Kubo and the Two Strings. Am I missing anything else, or is that the roster?
I think there is a new one, but I actually haven't seen it yet. It's like come out after all the others you just listed. There was also Missing Link, that's it.
Ah, yes, okay. Missing Link as well, starring Stephen Fry, if I recall correctly, with Bigfoot. But yes, so today we are discussing Paranorman, which is a claymation animated film, as are all the Laika films, which sets it apart straight away, I think, from, a lot of today's animated movies in general. Like, it's basically Laika and Aardman, isn't it, at this point?
One of the things I loved about it is that it's stop motion, because it makes it feel more unique, especially as, we don't see much stop motion because CGI is cheaper and easier to use. Obviously I don't have issues with CGI because obviously my favourite TV show of all time was made with CGI. But nowadays there's not really many attempts at the medium, so that's why I look at it. Particularly the illumination stuff looks so generic and churned out, but stop motion always looks amazing.
I mean, we had this sort of conversation in the Fallout episode, didn't we? Where we were just sort of talking about how it's just such a charming and kind of at times disturbing style, and it really works in this film's favour, I think, because there's bits of horror, bits of comedy. It never goes too far either way, I don't think, but it's a brilliant film. It's just visually pleasing to look at.
So Ewan, you suggested this, so you should go first.
Okay, so I discovered this film back when it came out in the cinema in 2012. This is such a bizarre story looking back. I was in a choir tour trip. As anyone who's listened to the Simpsons episode, I do sing sometimes. And yeah, I was on this choir tour, and I have no idea why. It was like I was about, maybe 16, 17 at this point. But it was this choir tour of 12 to kind of 18-year-olds, a good mix of people. And I guess we had free time or something, but we decided we'd go to the cinema and watch a movie as a whole group of this choir tour. And I remember the great controversy, because my friends and I really wanted to see, which was out at the same time, Dredd, the Judge Dredd film. But because obviously that's presumably a 15, right? Or is it a 12? It might have actually been a 12.
That was an 18.
Okay.
It was an 18, yeah.
Okay, right. Well, there you go. So we wanted to go see that. We were either 17 or 18, but it didn't matter. We would have got in. But then we also had a bunch of 12 to 16-year-olds with us as well. So we couldn't see Dredd, sadly. So we went to see Paranorman instead. And I remember coming out of it with a friend of mine, and both of us were like, oh my god, that was amazing. That was the best film ever. We really loved it. But what was hilarious was that we had this other friend of ours who absolutely hated it.
Oh.
So it was just this big controversy. Yeah, my friend and I, who did like it, and it stuck in my brain for years. You got to realize I'd not seen Coraline. I hadn't seen any of the Laika stuff before or after for a good few years after this point. Only until I was at a few years into uni, so maybe 2016, I finally rewatched Paranorman, and yeah, no, it's crazy. It's kind of just stuck in my brain. It's a bit like 9. I think I kind of wanted to do it because we did the 9 episode, and I felt like Yeah, it's the little movie that could, like it's one that a lot of people will have forgotten now, but the people who remember it really appreciate it, I guess, because I'm one of those people. So, yeah, no. So I'll go into reasons why I like it later.
You brought up the cinema thing. I think you brought that up in our X-Men episode because I had a similar experience of not being able to see X-Men Origins Wolverine and having to see Coraline instead, which I dodged a bullet. And it's funny that you said you couldn't get into Dread because in the summer when I went to see the Suicide Squad, the cinema let in a dad and 2 kids. Luckily, I've told them that it's 15, but then I think some woman in the couple rows in front said something like, "Oh yeah, your kids should not be watching this. There's a shark man who rips people in half." And it's like, yeah, I'm not going to let them see this.
Just before I begin, could you just redirect your attention to that picture of Ross Scott? Because that was my reaction to Ewan's friend not liking that film.
You don't like Wallace and Gromit?
You don't like Paranorman? Now you just use that picture whenever someone like doesn't like something that's really just, we can't get our head around why they wouldn't like it. So yeah, nice little meme. But anyway, how did I discover Paranorman? That was, believe it or not, similar to you, and I also discovered it literally as it was in cinemas, and I went to go see it in cinema as well. I was probably about 14 or 15 years old, because I'm actually slightly younger than you guys. And this was actually probably my first ever proper date with someone, actually. So I took a go out to see the movie. Obviously, so I was a 14/15-year-old. I was just a shy mess, so the date itself didn't really go well. But I enjoyed the film. So I went to go see it in cinemas, and I thought, this is absolutely incredible, and I just fell in love with it. I mean, I've always loved stop motion animation, so to see something like that on a big screen, just seeing how fluid it was really quite amazing. And I hadn't seen many cinematic films that were stop motion other than the stuff that Aardman had put out by this point. This is the first time I watched something that was kind of completely different from what Aardman would sort of make. I've since seen a lot of stop motion films in cinema, but this was like the first time I experienced something not Aardman related, which is really neat to see. But yeah, I've been in love with Paranorman as a movie, even as an adult as well, because I rewatched it again as an adult, really loved it. More or less how it is. That's how I discovered Paranorman, just when I was 14, 15, saw it in cinemas.
With me, I have vague memories of the film coming out as I read about it in Empire magazine. But I seem to remember it came out around the same time as Tim Burton's Frankenweenie, which is another kind of like animated horror film for kids, but I've also not. I think I was around 18, 19 when it came out, so I was in my first year of uni, and I never gave it a watch as it just didn't pique my interest. So I think it's probably a mix of me not really being interested in watching a quote-unquote kids movie, because this is around the time I was trying to be more quote-unquote grown-up, and only watching things that had like mature themes and stuff like that. And also me, despite being at this time a big fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, not really being into it because it wasn't until I played Silent Hill for the first time that horror became something that piqued my interest. Whether James and Ewan have both spoken about this film and how good it is, so I gave it a watch for this episode, and I had a good time watching it. That's what I'll say. So yeah,
there's a lot to unpack about it. I mean, I think I was saying to these guys before, like how quotable the film is for a start. I mean, there's a lot to praise about the animation, the comedy, but I would like to just sort of take a minute just to talk about how funny the film is, because genuinely, I've watched it 3 times, and probably every time I've watched it now, across different like ages, when I was like 15 or in my 20s, I've literally just been in hysterics. In fact, now as an adult, I catch on to more of the jokes as well, and there's a lot of adult jokes in this movie.
Do you use free weights? Because your deltoids are huge.
I've never used deltoids in my life. I swear, you can test me.
There's a lot. It does cater. It caters so well to like adult audiences that I actually didn't think I was watching a children's movie at all. I thought it was like very adult.
I think the film has genuinely funny moments. Like my favourite line is probably from my favourite character in the film, Neil. He threatens to throw some hummus at someone. He says,
"Don't make me throw this hummus. It's spicy."
And the other bit that I found really funny was this bit where all the parents are going to watch a school play, and every parent has a camcorder, but Norman, who's the main character, his dad, can't get his to work, and says,
"Great. Now we'll never get to remember this moment."
but everyone else in the audience is videoing it and their cameras are working. The bit that I found really funny, that was quite dark, is at the start we see like all these ghosts, and one of these ghosts is a gangster who has bricks wrapped around his legs. I found it really funny, and it's like go over most kids' head because they're not going to understand that this is just some mobster who's been sent to sleep with the fishes.
Yeah. He's got the concrete shoes, I think they were called. He throws someone in the river with concrete shoes. Yeah, I love him walking past. That's one of my favourite little scenes, is at the start when he's walking through town and there's just all the various ghosts that he's just chatting to. Because that's, right, premise. Norman is a young boy. He's a bit of a loner because he has this very special gift, which is that he can see and talk to ghosts. But no one else can, and his family think he's a freak. Everyone at school thinks he's a freak. The horrible bully, Alvin, kills a fly and says, "Talk to that." And Norman's just like,
"Flies don't talk."
He's got this gift, he can talk to ghosts, but then weird goings-on are happening because the town, it's basically a Salem surrogate. It was built, like, it's got this big tourist trade of, like, witch-related stuff because they'd had, like, a big witch trial and there was, like, a witch that was hanged. So it's basically the Salem witch trials idea, but then the witch's curse starts to come, and it's on the poster, so it's fine. The dead rise from their graves, and things get bad very quickly, and only Norman, the one who can talk to ghosts and to the dead, can stop this menace. But yeah, so that's the general gist, I guess.
Yeah.
And it's a cute, funny film with claymation.
And it starts off perfectly as well, because it starts off with a parody of ropey horror movies, and it makes fun of zombies are incredibly slow, and the fact that in a lot of zombie movies, people don't tend to run from zombies when they come towards them. They just stand there screaming. This woman who's standing there, this slow-moving zombies walking towards her, and she stops for a moment, kind of looks at the camera, and then dreaming again. And then we see Norman at home watching this movie with his grandma sitting on the sofa, and his grandma's like,
"What's happening now?"
Well, the zombie is eating her head, Grandma.
That's not very nice. What's he doing that for?
'Cause he's a zombie? That's what they do.
He's gonna ruin his dinner.
And then the grandma says,
"Tell him to turn up the thermostat too, will you? My feet are like ice."
and then you meet the rest of his family, and they're all introduced, get a feel for them. And then Norman innocently asks,
Grandma says, "Can you turn up the heating? Her feet are cold."
the rest of the family's all shocked, and they're like, "You do realise Grandma's dead, right?" And then that's when we kind of realise, oh, Norman can talk to ghosts.
Grandma's in a better place now.
No, she's not. She's in the living room.
There's definitely, I do love the fact that as a horror fan, I can see all the influences on this film, because the most obvious reference for the zombie where, like, the woman is screaming and just stands there as the zombie comes to eat her in the film they show at the start, that's definitely the Lucio Fulci zombie Flesh Eaters film. That film is great. It has a really great score, like really great music, but the women in that film, they literally just stand there screaming as the zombies, and like they literally just eat them. It's ridiculous. So that's a great little parody, yeah.
I just liked how it was this good solid movie of how like terribly made B movies are, really, because like the whole set's like falling apart as that's happening. Like there's a microphone shows up partway through. I think the camera starts shaking as well, and it's just like, yeah, these films are cheap. They're great. I love B movies, but they are like, they are like kind of a bit amateurish, aren't they?
In many ways.
But that's what makes them good. Like, Evil Dead is for all intents and purposes, that was a B movie, but like, it's got really good production values for what it is.
Yeah, to be fair, like the Lucio Fulci zombie film, I'm not knocking it. Like, it's a genuinely great like horror film, but there's just stuff in it now that you look at and you go, what?
but it's also kind of, I think it's like making fun of it, but also pointing at the charm of those things. Do you know what I mean? As you say, it takes full inspiration from that. And like, even Paranorman's room is just like literally just full of like horror film pop culture references and stuff like that. It's clearly made by horror fans, the whole thing, which is really
cool. Yeah,
cool.
because Neil wears a hockey mask at one point, which is a reference to Jason Voorhees.
Yeah, when he turns up, like it's a mix of things, because he looks like Michael Myers from Halloween, where there's like the hanging clothes on the clothesline. That's Halloween. But yeah, he's got the hockey mask on and it looks terrifying, and then he just goes,
Wanna play some hockey?
He sounds like Millhouse,
I just love how precious the film is as well. There's a lot of sweet things about it. Like, the characters are... I don't think there's a single unlikable character in the whole movie. Even like the nasty bully characters end up having like kind of goofy and likable, redeemable traits. Even if they even that one bully. Like, what is the bully's name in this? Sorry.
Alvin.
A slight bone to pick with Alvin, because I mean it's not just Paranorman who does this, but I don't get why films always make like the bully look like kind of like a goth or something, because normally it's the goths who get bullied and the people who are bullying are like the ones who are into like sports and stuff. At least that was my experience in school.
Yeah, but he was kind of like a wannabe goth, I think. I don't think he was really a goth, do you know what I mean? He just kind of... He was always trying to look cool.
That's so Alvin. That was good.
So he's always trying to do... Like, there's one bit where he's trying to do breakboxing in front of... Or breakdancing, sorry, in front of a bunch of girls, and it just looks like the most weird thing ever.
Look sharp. Don't make me play a blick side.
That's a really funny scene.
But that's what I liked about that. Even though he's kind of funny to laugh at, I think what he is like, he reminds me of like an insecure sort of character that just feels the need to overcompensate, and that's kind of, it's almost evident throughout. So there's a lot of dimensions to each of the characters, even like the most unlikable ones as well. And like every character's memorable. I mean, I love, like, Norman's a great character. Neil is just hilarious.
You shouldn't let them get you down. They always do stuff like that to me.
Why?
Because I'm fat, and my allergies make my eyes leak, and I sweat when I walk too fast, and I have a lunchbox with a kitten on it. Ooh, and I have irritable bowel syndrome.
Neil's the best, yes.
Yeah.
I love how he just wants to be friends with Norman. He's like, Norman's weird like I am. I want to be friends with him. And then Norman's just like, I want to be left alone, which I can kind of relate to.
I like to be alone.
So do I. Let's do it together.
But yeah, he's very persistent, but not in an annoying way.
I think most of the characters, they remind me of real people. I remember going to school with people like this when I was younger. So I think they did a very good job with the script and depicting characters. I like Mitch as well.
You don't need to be hanging out with weird people, okay? That's a tip.
Don't blow this for me, Mitch. This one's not weird. He talks to dead people.
So Neil is fat, and then he's got his older brother who's like the polar opposite, where he's a huge, like, muscly hunk guy.
Beefcake, basically.
Yeah. And he's like working on his car. Like, Neil's like watching TV like with crisps, and then there's Mitch with his car, and he's got like an 8-pack.
RIPPED, like a 7-pack at least.
Yeah, and then Norman's older sister is seriously crushing on him as well throughout the entire film.
Yeah, Courtney. And there's no one unlikable, because to be fair, like, the whole start of the film where everyone's thinking that like Norman's a freak because he talks to ghosts. I mean, yeah, that would be pretty weird and creepy that a guy is kind of walks around talking to himself.
One thing I've got to say as well, though, the way I think most of the town do react like normal people when the zombies show up for the first time and they're like, "Hey, let's take them down!" I'm just like, yeah, that's what? Yeah, I think that's how people would react if they saw zombies. They wouldn't just freak out.
Yeah, no, the idea that basically when the zombies do appear, the townspeople are actually a little too keen to start murdering the zombies.
Isn't there like there's an actual statement like by when the cop shows up, it goes like, "Hey, accidentally shooting people's the job of the police," or something like that.
That is an amazing line. Yeah.
What do you think you're doing firing at civilians? That is for the police to do.
Oh God.
This film was ahead of its time in that regard.
Hey, this movie pulls down a statue and says that's a good thing to do. So this movie was ahead of its time.
Oh dear.
Oh
man.
Show this movie to the kids. Everyone.
I think it's aimed.
No kids showed them this movie.
It doesn't insult the children's intelligence either, because like I'll probably watch this when I was 14. I mean, most of the adult jokes, they know kids are probably making those sort of jokes anyway, and have probably been exposed to it anyway. So it's just like, we're not gonna just pretend this doesn't happen or anything like that. Like, how old like Norman is? 13? He probably knows what the F word is, for instance. Do you know what I mean?
There's the line where basically, so Mr. Prendergast is his uncle, voiced by John Goodman, and he can also. So here's a little twist: his uncle can also see ghosts as well. But there's a bit when Mr. Prendergast asks Norman to like perform this task, and he says, "Swear to do it," sort of thing.
Swear! You mean like the F word?
But yeah, there's a lot of that going on, and that's why I think it's great for adults as well. I mean, I personally was just in literal hysterics watching it for the third odd time, honestly. It's just really good.
I like the insane melodramatic drama teacher who's like just screaming at these children to perform this play about the witch trial.
You stink of illiteracy! Pilgrims! The Mayflower!
But she also states the message of the film, or part of the message, which is basically this town, they committed this horrible thing, which is that the witch trials were horrible. Like, in real life, they were horrible. But the town is like kitsch central. Like, they've completely merchandised everything to do with the witches and witchcraft, and there's like a witch-themed casino, and like all of this witch stuff in general, and like witch merchandise, all that. And then the drama teacher, when one of the students like questions like the historical accuracy of the play that they're doing, because she's dressed like an old crone kind of thing, and the drama teacher's just like,
It's not supposed to be! It's supposed to sell postcards and keychains!
it's for the tourists, basically.
When you mentioned the burning witches, I thought of Monty Python and the Holy Grail, like the best scene of the movie where they're trying to determine if a woman's a witch. Like, if she weighs the same as a duck, therefore she's made of wood, and therefore she's a witch.
Build a bridge out of her. Very good.
I also think the script is strong in the sense that it is actually a genuinely good story. Like, previously, Leica has made, Coraline, which is based off a book by Neil Gaiman. Neil Gaiman's a, successful writer who's written across the fantasy genre. So I actually do think it actually does take a bit of inspiration from, I want to say it's probably a bit Neil Gaiman inspired a little bit, because it does have elements of the sort of fantasy and like supernatural and paranormal going on in it. But it is its own original story, and I actually think it's probably better than most Neil Gaiman's work anyway. The plot twist is really nice. As I say, most characters are redeemable. It's tragic as well. There is an actual tragic tale involving a witch, which I won't spoil. I won't spoil too much of it, but it comes as such a surprise from such a innocent film at first, and like suddenly out of nowhere it becomes adult and a bit darker, and it comes as such a shock. I guess I don't know. I don't know if you guys felt the same way, but like as the sort of story unfolds a little bit, you kind of realise. Yeah,
it is shocking. It is a shocking story, and it's really strong for that. I think that.
Yeah, especially for a film for kids. Like, I wasn't exposed to much horror growing up, but I think this is a great way to kind of introduce a genre to children, because I think this is something you wanted to bring up, was about horror works aimed at children.
Yeah, so one of the things that I like about this film is that it is a gateway to horror for kids, because horror is such a fascinating genre. Like, everyone knows the conventions of them, even if they don't actually watch horror films themselves, if that makes sense. Like, it's such a pervasive genre. Yeah, but despite the majority of mainstream audiences don't actually watch horror films, but we all know stuff with horror. Like, we all know what vampires are. We all know what a zombie is. We all know what's supposed to happen in a slasher movie. It's fascinating, and I find that so interesting. And yeah, just watching Paranorman, I was thinking about all the kind of gateways to horror that I had as a kid, and it was things like, Goosebumps, Round the Twist.
Have you ever thought like this? How strange things happen. Are you going round the twist?
The Demon Headmaster, which is such a CBBC thing to bring up, but yeah, the Demon Headmaster. James brought up, what was it, Gruesome?
Grizzly Tales for Gruesome Kids, yes.
Yeah,
traumatizing show.
Yeah, then that's great.
Yeah, for me, my kind of only really thing was when I was a teenager, I watched this program called Dark Oracle, which is about these high schoolers who discover this comic book which appears to predict their futures. And it turns out the comic book they're reading is actually a parallel, dark, twisted parallel universe of their world that sometimes creeps into theirs. And it's kind of cheesy in places, but I had a lot of fun watching it. And I think it's a good show for kind of like older kids and teenagers.
It's all the comics' fault.
With children, you know, like we're such a weird culture where we don't really know if we want children to be exposed to this stuff, but at the same time we keep exposing them to this kind of stuff, to horror. You think of Doctor Who, like Doctor Who gets away with a lot of like really quite horrific imagery and violence.
Yes, because we spoke about in our Ninja Turtles episode about how Mary Whitehouse was on a crusade about Doctor Who's apparent violence.
I mean, it wasn't really that violent. Was it just Tom Baker fell in the water once and popped back out again or something? I don't know. I haven't actually watched the scene. I don't know, but that's what I've got.
It was that, yeah. But to be fair, I was thinking more of the Doctor Who of the, you know,
Empty
Christopher
Child.
Eccleston and all of them.
Oh yeah,
like,
Are You
Empty
My Mummy?
Child. Yeah, man, it was creepy. But also things like Family of Blood, like they murder people in that.
Oh, that's my favourite episode. That's really good.
Yeah, Dalek. Yeah.
What are you going to do, sucker him to death?
Mm-hmm.
That is actually, to be fair, that is horrible. I don't care what people say, that is ridiculously awful. Like,
yeah, at that point, Daleks were kind of a joke in the cultural osmosis, and that episode was written to kind of make Daleks a threatening villain again.
Yeah, I did a solid job, to be fair. Like toilet plunger suck someone's face off. But yeah, no, I agree 100%. But I think it's like the whole Roald Dahl argument, isn't it? Why add in this sort of violent twist at the end or whatever? And Roald Dahl's like response to that is because, you know, children love that stuff, really. You know,
exactly.
Like people sort of downplay how intelligent kids are. Like, really, they know that dark things can happen and stuff like that. And when it's presented in a way that's cartoonish and comedic and sort of like... I mean, Doctor Who, yes, it is dark, but it's not over-the-top, violent, gory kind of intensity. Like, Torchwood does a bit of that, I think, where it goes a bit in the next peg up, if that makes sense.
Well, Torchwood was always that up.
Torchwood was meant to be a bit...
That's what I mean. Yeah. That's what I mean. So I think it still is trying to keep children in mind, going like, all right, yes, we want to make this dark. Yes, we want to make it a bit like Twilight Zone, but how dark can we do it? I think Paranorman's the same as well, because it's like... Yeah, there's zombies and stuff like that. And yeah, you know, there's a dark story that's underlying all of it. But there's no kind of moment where I think it's, like, deeply disturbing.
Oh, yeah. It doesn't get too much, like...
No.
Like, I remember Goosebumps existed. I think I was kind of wary of it. I was a bit too young to watch it. And now, watching clips of it as an adult, I'm just, like, hilarious.
Yeah.
So cheesy, yeah.
It's, you know, there's sometimes when something's a bit darker, it makes it more interesting. I don't think... it should be any different for children. I would show my kids this film, personally. I think there's nothing about it I think is bad, but I think it's also fun enough to, you know, keep people interested, so why not? Do you know what I mean?
Do you know what I found interesting upon watching this, which I hadn't really clocked before? But with zombie films in general, the only time I can think of outside of Paranorman where the zombies themselves are actually placed in their own historical background, because they're like the Pilgrim Fathers, right? You know, they're like the Salem witch trial people. The only time I can think of where they did anything similar to that with zombies rising from the graves was The Simpsons, when like all of the when they had zombie Shakespeare and zombie Billy the Kid and things like that.
Show's over, Shakespeare. Is this the end of zombie Shakespeare?
I beg to differ. There's a Scooby-Doo Zombie Island movie that does a good job of it.
Oh yeah, I've heard
you're right.
It's supposed to be quite good. I've not actually seen that.
You and I have both watched it on Halloween.
Yeah. You're right, with the pirates, yeah.
Like it was horrible. That pirate moon scar was like nothing but bones. And then he got worse. Like a zombie!
It's interesting, there's so little, like, zombie stuff where they actually refer to the history of the zombies and why they are zombies. I don't know, Pirates of the Caribbean, Curse of the Black Pearl, you know, maybe they're kind of
great
zombies.
movie, that one.
But even then, you know, when I just think of the vast scheme of zombie films. So, you know, they're all the Romero zombies where they don't rise from the grave, you know. Return of the Living Dead's a comedy. They do rise from the grave in that, but it's a comedy, so it doesn't take itself seriously at all. Yeah, no, it's interesting. I suddenly realized this is the only film that actually tackles that kind of concept of the dead rising from the grave, which is interesting.
And it's not really a parody of zombies. Like, it starts out with a parody of like 80s cheesy zombie movies, but the zombies are still scary, and it's like the zombies are still threatening. There's just jokes, kind of like Shaun of the Dead in that respect, because it's not a parody of zombie movies. It's just a comedy movie that happens to have zombies.
Yeah, totally.
100%. There's also a bit where one of the things I thought was quite funny. The only thing I've seen do make this joke before, it's a very funny joke. I've seen it done in Ed's World before. It's when the zombies look around them and realise they're actually in the modern world and they can't cope with it. They look at a television screen and they're like, like, of course you're going to react that way if you've like been not seen the world for like 1,000 years and then realise that like electricity's been utilised in such a way that now you can have images projected in front of you. That's going to blow your mind.
Yeah.
So they all can't cope with that and they're all just like, But yeah, I like that, because I think that's 100% how someone would react if they were brought out of time and brought into our present day. It would be like, what the hell?
Yeah, no, definitely. There's a lot of great humour there. Just the idea that, zombies wouldn't actually respond well to the modern world. And as we mentioned earlier, you know, the idea that the townspeople would actually have a very good idea of what to do when zombies attack, because we've all been exposed to zombie culture. You know, you aim for the head. That kind of thing. Well, there's the line as well when Alvin's freaking out that the zombies are going to eat his brain, and then Norman just says, you don't have anything to worry about.
Savage, just complete savage.
Yeah, completely. Oh my god. I don't want to spoil who it is that dies, but there's someone who dies and their body goes into rigor mortis, and that's one of the funniest like slapstick scenes in like children's films I can think of, when Norman's like trying to get this book out of his hands and it turns into like Frankenstein's monster and it like falls on him. That's great.
One of my favourite quotes is when like Norman's had his outburst and he's fallen out with his family, and then his mum and dad are like driving home, and then like the mother's just going like,
not believing in the afterlife is like not believing in astrology.
just
yeah,
like...
yeah.
Oh my god. There's just little things like that written into the script that just make me smile so much. Like, who is the writer of this? It's Chris Butler, I think it is. Like, I need to see his other work. He's also, to be fair, he also did write Kubo and the Two Strings, which is an amazing film as well. But yeah, no, very good writer, absolutely. I think he did a fantastic job in this film.
You know what's great? I watched Coraline before watching Paranorman, and one thing that I noticed was just how big the scale was of Paranorman by comparison to Coraline. Because like looking back at Coraline, it's such a small scale film. It's just the house. And everything's around the house, and there's like a few characters. Paranorman's a whole town.
Yeah,
it's
so I was thinking,
to the were-rabbit level. You know?
Yeah, but I was thinking that because I've not actually seen Coraline since I saw it in the cinema, which was 2009. And I was thinking about it, I said, I don't remember actually many. I think there's only like a handful of characters in Coraline, but Paranorman's got like this whole massive town.
Yeah,
it's got a big cast. Yeah, and then just loads of extras as well. It's Curse of the Were-Rabbit and Chicken Run level. Like it's a big production. This is when you mentioned Kubo. Like Kubo was massive as well. Like on a more like they made these really huge like monsters that were just incredible. Like just really brilliantly designed.
I need to watch it again. There's another thing I wanted to mention. I don't know if you guys watched past the end credits. Technically, it's not a post-credits scene, but what Leica's done at the end is actually show the process of making a model, like very quickly in a little sort of sped up, like frame by frame sort of construction of like character model of Norman, which is really cool. Yeah, like literally just right at the end of the end credits, they show how they assemble his like metal skeleton and like sew together like all the fabric and stuff like that, design his hair, and they put it all together and stuff like that, and then show him moving at the end, and it's just like the coolest thing, like how they do it. They do a different approach to art, but it's not clay per se. They're more like rag dolls. They're more like actual sort of dolls that they've actually sewn together and stuff like that. And that's really, I thought it was really neat.
I think because it does look very distinct from like Aardman, which is usually like practically all plasticine. Because sometimes if you look at it, it does look like it is kind of CGI. It's fully stop motion.
They did a good job with some of the special effects on it as well, I think. There's a lot of good post-production on it that makes it look very smooth, I've noticed. Like, it's little things you notice that make the animation more crisper as well, I thought was really cool.
One thing that sprung to mind is because my Blu-ray copy that I ordered for the sake of doing this episode, it's not just any old Blu-ray, it's a 3D Blu-ray, and it's made me remember that this came out at the time when 3D films in the cinema were like a big thing. I think they still kind of do them now, but I don't think anyone really chooses to watch them in 3D because obviously you don't want to wear the glass and it costs more as well.
One thing I wanted to bring up, I know it's kind of unrelated, but you mentioned at the beginning we don't know too many like other films in cinema that's not Aardman or Leica. What's the animation company that works on the Wes Anderson films? I was just thinking about this the whole time because that's the only other sort of like set of like stop motion animations films I can think of are like The Isle of Dogs and Fantastic Mr. Fox. Is there an animation company that works on those? Do we know? The only thing I can find is maybe like Revolution Studios, but that's not really... Well, 20th Century Fox Animation, I think, maybe, but that's...
Maybe, yeah.
Oh, owned by Disney now, probably.
Yeah.
I've never seen Fantastic Mr. Fox.
Oh, you should watch it. I watched it over Christmas. Lovely film.
I remember it coming. Actually watched it.
If you like The Isle of Dogs, I definitely recommend it.
One thing I will say very quickly, this is like not the most interesting thing, but I kind of like it. So Norman is voiced by Cody Smith-McPhee, who recently won a Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actor for Power of the Dog, which is a film that I recommend because it's the most sinister movie made in like the last few years. So kind of Paranorman-ish in that regard. But fair play to Cody, he's had a good career.
Yeah.
He was in all the... Weirdly enough, Rob has been watching all the Planet of the Apes movies, and Cody Smith-McPhee is in Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. So there you go.
Yeah, of course. I've literally just finished the dreadful Tim Burton Planet of the Apes, so I'm now going on to Rise, Dawn, and War. So I'll keep my eye out for him.
And kind of in line with our connections, Anna Kendrick, who voices Stacey Pilgrim.
Oh yeah, she's in Scott Pilgrim.
Plays Stacey Pilgrim in Scott Pilgrim. Yeah, she's in this as Courtney, the sister. It doesn't matter all that much, but I just found it interesting, just like realizing it was them. Oh, another fun thing, one of the zombies is voiced by Bernard Hill, King Theoden.
Oh, nice.
Just putting that out there. Yeah. This movie has a really cute like credit sequence at the end where they all look like horror movie posters, which is great. So.
One thing I forgot to mention actually is that the soundtrack for this film is really lovely, I think, personally. Like, it's just...
Oh, yeah. I particularly like the music that plays at the start. It's kind of like a 80s horror movie kind of theme.
Yeah.
And that's how the credits were as well. It's kind of like, looks like a B-movie credits because it obviously at the start is essentially a B-movie.
The sort of final act of the movie, the music that plays during that is so emotional and it really makes the scene. It's like incredible. So yeah, it's like, I mean, obviously we've talked about the writing and the animation, but that is also one thing I just wanted to touch upon is that the sound design and soundtrack in this film is pretty decent. Like, well, not pretty decent, that's an understatement. It's really good. It's incredible stuff.
Really nice flute piece in the soundtrack. Like the orchestral music is really nice.
Yeah.
Also, this is really obscure, but I wanted to bring it up. So that obviously this is a movie about witchcraft and zombies, but there's a George Romero film. So George Romero, famous zombie filmmaker, actually did a lot of horror films that weren't zombie films, and one of them was a movie called Season of the Witch, which has the song Season of the Witch by Donovan. That's referenced in this film when the drama teacher is directing the children to sing really badly Season of the Witch.
Must be the season of the
Great. Now we'll never get to remember this moment.
Anyway, I just thought that was really cute. It was a cute little nod to the Romero film and the Donovan song. Also, Season of the Witch is a really fun 60s psychedelic, both movie and song. So I recommend both of those. There's a lot of great references in this film, actually. Not just to, like, obvious, like, Halloween and zombie references, but, like, other horror films. Yeah, but it was just when you mentioned the soundtrack, I just thought, like, oh, yeah, that's it was such a neat little song to hear.
Yeah, favourite character, favourite moment? Yeah, I guess a good place to end it.
Yeah. I think so.
I can go first. So for me, my favourite character is Neil, just because I love how optimistic he is and how he kind of like embraces just who he is, because obviously he's weird and he's kind of happy with that.
Don't get your bra in a twist, fat boy. This has nothing to do with you, so keep out of my way.
Or what?
Or, I'll punch you in the boobs.
I don't have boobs. These are pectorals. Ow, my boobs!
That's why he gravitates towards Norman, because Norman's also weird, so he wants to be friends with Norman. It is, of course, the homicide, but also, of course, I mentioned the bit with the camcorder, just that bit made me laugh. Probably because it's the kind of joke you'd see in The Simpsons, a kind of Simpsons joke.
Yeah, definitely. The one other thing, talking about like horror stuff that I was exposed to as a kid, definitely all the Simpsons horror episodes, the Treehouse of Horror stuff. I was thinking a lot of the episode where the teachers eat the pupils. That one freaked me out a lot as a kid. Anyway.
I think my favourite character, as cliche as it sounds, might actually be Norman. I think Norman's just a really cool guy. I mean, like, I know what it's like growing up in high school to kind of be a bit of a outsider and stuff like that, but also kind of like find, solace in like escapism and like, in films. And I remember having a room just like his and stuff like that, full of like pop culture references. And I just thought, that's just really relatable. He's a good role model, I think, for like young people that are probably struggling through high school and stuff like that. There's another thing I didn't really mention too much, but the bullying and stuff like that they do depict in this film is kind of accurate. Obviously they do like make the bully look way more stupid than they need to, but at the same time, what Norman goes through is definitely what a lot of kids do go through. And I remember at the time when I was kind of bullied, I thought, this dude gets me. So
that's the real horror, is school.
Oh yeah.
In general, yeah. I think my favorite is actually Norman's dad. My favorite character. He has a lot of really great lines in this. Like,
I'm nothing if I'm not liberal, but that limp-wristed hippie garbage needs to be nipped in the bud.
I like the dad. I like the line when the wife is like, "You're gonna have a heart attack," and he says,
"I'll come back and haunt Norman. Maybe then he'll start listening to me."
a lot of like deadpan black jokes like that I really like in this film, and I like him. And my favorite moment is probably the stupidest, most obvious joke in the world, but I really like it, is when the guy sees a zombie at like the end of the alleyway, but he's like waiting for the vending machine food thing to like twirl around. That's like a Simpsons joke right there, where like he's waiting for the food package to like come out of the vending machine, and he's like screaming the whole time, and then like the zombie's very slowly coming towards him to the point that he actually does get it in the end, because it takes so long to get to him. Yeah, I like that joke. It's really dumb and really obvious, but I love it.
I'm trying to think. So many good scenes in this film. It's hard to pick one. I think my favourite scene has to be... what the hell? It's the bit where like Neil's walking with Norman, and then Norman's crazy uncle comes out of nowhere, goes psst, like that, and then Neil goes,
"That statue just pissed at us."
I don't know why. It's so dumb, but it just made me laugh so much, and I was like, yeah, this is great.
It's a great joke. It's brilliant. It's perfect.
I was so torn. It was either that or the astrology scene, and I thought, that one's just won it.
So next time we will be returning to the world of Jerry Anderson and Super Mario Nation. So, bye for action as we take a look at Stingray, the adventures of Troy Tempest and Bones, Aquanaut from the World Aquanaut Security Patrol, with the evil undersea tyrant Titan.
Yeah.
Very exciting.
Yeah. It's going to be cool.
Thank you for listening to Bloobcast. We've been Rob, James and Ewan. You can find all of our episodes on bloobcast.com. We're also available on SoundCloud, Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
We also have a YouTube channel where we produce shorter episodes called Blooblets, where we discuss the latest news in popular culture. You can find us on social media with @BlueCastPod on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. Please like, follow and subscribe so you can get the latest updates on new episodes.
We also have an email address, which is bloobcast@outlook.com. So if you have any feedback or want to suggest things for us to review in our future episodes, please feel free to drop us an email and you'll get a shout out on the next episode. Please also rate and review us on YouTube and Apple Podcasts. More engagement helps us a lot. And finally, please share the podcast amongst your friends and family. Help spread the word so that the Bloobcast empire can become strong and mighty.
So, until next time, I guess.
Yeah, until next time, the Bloobcast bids you farewell.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So, is it true? What? Can you see ghosts like everywhere all the time?
Yeah.
Awesome. Ooh, do you think you can see my dog Bub? He was ran over by an animal rescue van. Tragic and ironic.